Well, officially, Rotarians and guests, this is the Rotary Club of Toronto, and I'm Prince Kumar, your club president. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our Rotary meeting for today. Next, we will have the recognition of traditional lands, the invocation, and we will also have a special Rotary pledge, followed by our O Canada and a royal toast. If you want, please stand for the, not now, but please stand for the pledge and our O Canada. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge that we're at the traditional lands of many Indigenous peoples who have walked and cared for this land for 15,000 years. They include the Anishinabek, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Treaty Peoples of the Mississauga of Credit. Let this be a time for heroes. Let this be a time when ordinary people do extraordinary things. As Rotarians, as guests, as members of our local and global communities, let us not stand aside nor walk away. Let us be heroes, for today you can do extraordinary things. This Truth and Reconciliation Week, we acknowledge the enduring pain of the Indigenous people in Canada as their lives continue to be impacted by colonialism. In particular, we remember the tragic loss of young lives through the residential school system, torn from their families, deprived of their culture, dying far from home. The children's suffering has become a challenge for all Canadians to learn more about the Indigenous history. Let us reflect and review our Rotarian Pledge together. If you would like, please stand for our Rotarian Pledge, followed by a special rendition of O Canada by the Anishinabek Police Services. Our pledge. We will stand with the Indigenous people in Canada as they fight injustice. We will build relationships with Indigenous people. We will support the Indigenous education, and we will listen and reflect as we work together towards reconciliation. And now, the national anthem.
Oh Canada, terre de nos aïeux, ton front essaie de fleurs glorieux. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, Geche Wanaj, Nani Bweda, Midwiche Wendonda, Nani Bweda, Midwiche Wendonda.
Miguanak, Mekeze, Miguanak, Mekeze, Miguanak, Mekeze, Miguanak, Mimwag, Miquin Manarik, Anishinabek Hasewin, hey, om.
Rotarians and guests, to our Indigenous peoples and to Rotary. Please be seated. Rotarians and guests, it is now my pleasure to introduce our head table. I'm pleased to have the following people with me today. Maureen Bird, Rotarian since 1996, former classification, financial advisor, office manager, chair of our voice voting, treasurer of International Service Committee, member of our tech team, our How We Hobby speaker, and I think she's probably got at least 10 other titles in Rotary, not just our club, but the district. Maureen, how you do it, it is really amazing, and thank you for sharing with us today how to stay young. Thank you. Stephanie Christensen, our impact reporter from Shelterbox today, who will be formally introduced shortly. Rick Goldsmith, Rotarian since 1994, former classification, public accounting, valuation services, national, a club board member, president of our charitable foundation, and of course, our office of the executive speaker today. Now, as Rick mentioned, Rick's stewardship of the foundation has not only taken us to a next level, he's really gotten behind both the club and the foundation to get those guiding principles out, and now they are. And that is going to guide us as we incorporate the new charitable asks that are coming through and how to properly steward them. So thank you, Rick, for doing that and for collaborating with the club, foundation, and the district. For our next few members of the head table, they're actually present in person. So what I would like is if you could stand when your name is called, starting with Beliepa, our accounting manager, and remain standing while all members have been introduced together. Belly has been with Rotary since 2010. He's our accounting manager and is retiring today. Belly is a very, very, very special guest for today, and we are going to be doing something a little special for you in just a few moments. Please remain standing. David Libby, Rotarian since 1981, former classification, mining, precious metals. David is retired. He's the co-chair of our Charitable Asks Committee, member of our Indigenous Working Group, and since becoming the co-chair of our Charitable Asks Committee, I think he's really taken on some of the technology stuff and he's really geared up on it. Thank you, David, for all you do, and really looking forward to seeing the charitable asks coming through and your stewardship as we go through them. Robert O'Brien, Rotarian since 1985, 36 years, law practice general. He's a partner with Coots Crane and our club past president, member of our program committee, host to our guest speaker. And Robert, thank you again for stepping in when we needed you as a host. Robert has been critical in our program committee in terms of bringing in some amazing speakers throughout the years. Thank you for your service, Robert. Jon Allen, former ambassador to Israel and our guest speaker for today, who will be shortly introduced. Rotarians and guests, please welcome our head table. For our virtual meetings, we do not have an official monitor to introduce our visiting Rotarians and guests, so I will proceed. To our visiting Rotarians, thank you for choosing your club for your makeup, and we hope you enjoy the meeting. To our guests, and I'll take this liberty of giving a quick hello to my niece who is joining in from England, as she's doing a political science major, and she was really interested and said, Uncle Prince, can I really come in? I said, yes, you can. to all our guests, welcome to our virtual meeting today. Please feel free to contact the office and find out how you may be able to make a difference by joining us. Rotarians, please welcome our visitors in the tradition of our great club. Now, you've heard this before, and you may already know this, but in case you do not, you should be aware that at these virtual Rotary meetings, and this is of course for our virtual participants, if your video camera is on, that you may show up, not just for these recordings, but also on our social media. So we ask that you please present a professional image and be aware of what's going on in your background when your camera is on. If you do not want to appear, please turn off your camera, as we will not be able to edit you out at a later date. A couple of other announcements. Just a reminder that you must please pre-register for all physical Rotary hybrid meetings at our National Club luncheons. Due to our Thanksgiving holiday, our next physical meeting will be Friday, October 22nd. We are having a meeting on October 15th. However, that's going to be virtual. But our October 22nd meeting is with Matt Pegg, the Toronto Fire Chief. It should be noted that not all our meetings have a physical component at the National Club, and some will be virtual. And Carol will graciously, of course, let you know in advance which ones are virtual. Now, of course, you remember this, but make sure it is necessary to have your 2-dose vaccination certificate on file for all physical meetings, and email that certificate to Carol, please, prior to the meeting. We will no longer be requiring COVID waivers to be signed, as there is enough notice at the National Club, but you must register for the lunch, and you cannot simply show up at the door. Of course, now we are also allowing guests to come in, which is great, which includes Rotaracts, and they must register with Carol with their 2-dose certificates as well. If you are a Rotaract guest, you will have to follow the same process. However, the lunch cost is adjusted, and do contact the Rotary office regarding that. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you there. Now for my next Rotary announcement. You would have gotten an email earlier this week, about our Rotary Minute videos. Now I have to comment on the Rotary Minute videos. As our first release came out from our marketing and communications team, we had a spike up in the number of people joining us. 8 people submitted that form. I had the pleasure of interviewing 2 earlier this week, and they are going to be looking at joining the club in the coming weeks. So our Rotary videos, our other marketing campaigns are working, but now we need your help. So we invite you to share and like these new inspirational concept videos. In a minute or so, these are stories that help inspire with a smile and empower to act. These are our stories, the stories of the organizations that we help, our members, our projects, our hobbies, and much, much more. Let us join to invite our friends, our colleagues, our family members, and simply share them. Let them see for themselves if Rotary is for them. Today, at our meeting, we launch our second Rotary video. It's already up on our websites and on all our social media platforms, so do like and share.
Liverpool had been heavily bombed, and houses and most other things were in short supply. I remember being taken down to the local clinic to get spoonfuls of cod liver oil and orange juice to supplement my diet. At this point, one of my prized possessions was a blanket. It was blue and white and had the owl and the pussycat. My name is John Bogan, and I'm here to thank the Rotary Club of Toronto for that present. I feel an affinity to the Canadian child who first had it, and I hope that they weren't too upset when the parents took the blanket away from them and sent it over to keep me warm.
For more information, follow the Rotary Club of Toronto to learn how together we can make a difference.
Thank you to Christina McMillan and our Marketing Communications Committee for putting that together. Next up, for a very special segment, as I mentioned earlier, Belly is retiring today, and we're really going to miss you, Belly. And on that note, first off, I'd like to call our very own Executive Director, Carol, to the stage.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me okay at the back? I've got a big voice, I know. Good. Okay. Well, this is a rare moment. Carol on camera and at the lectern. Everyone, it is nice to see you all today, and I have the pleasant and not so pleasant task of honoring Belly and thanking Belly for, I might get choked up a bit today, and thanking Belly for his over 11 years of service as our accounting manager for our club and our foundation, and to say goodbye. We have a few things to wrap up with the audit and to orient Eason, our new hire, but this is Belly's final day. Belly came to us as a reference from Jason Phelps. Thank you, Jason, which was to cover a maternity leave position. And when that accounting clerk resigned, I saw an opportunity to work with an intelligent, kind, personable, thoughtful, patient, dedicated, and overall amazing person. And I am not always right, but in this case, I think I am. He is all that and more, and he knocked the Rotary four-way test out of the park. And lucky for the club and the foundation, and for me, and for you, and you, and you, and you, all of you, Belly accepted that opportunity and went above and beyond his job description to help us all. Whether it is a Rotarian, Rotaractor, committee chair, or co-op intern, everybody loves Belly. You're blushing, Belly, under that mask. Now, would someone please cover Eason's ears? Belly makes his job look easy. Cover his ears, Belly. And it's not. Belly's calm, patient, and kind approach in a nonprofit, it's okay, Belly. Belly's kind, calm, patient approach in a nonprofit environment with a revolving door of executives, member volunteers, and priorities is a huge asset, and we're extremely, extremely lucky to have him. I think Michelle got that fun with the word asset in there. I, as executive director, could always rely on him to have my back. And we are a great team, and I consider Belly my forever friend. And I will miss seeing him in the office. And he has promised to show my husband and I India when COVID has settled down. Past President Sandy Boucher once jokingly said, "You two have way too much fun in the office together." When there are only two people working in the office on a day-to-day basis, you had better hope that you get along. And we did, and we do. Belly knows where I hide all the bodies. And whether it was lugging Christmas holiday toys for kids, trying to get and not trying to get trapped in the Fairmont freight elevator, balancing the books, chasing signing authorities, or soothing Rotarians' troubled souls, and you know who you are, Belly did it all in style. And if you want to see him laugh, you can't see under his mask, but just say to him, "Knock yourself out," or "I'm on the train." And he will flash that big smile. He's really doing it under that mask. I can see it in his eyes. I can't believe it's been 11 years. Time flies when you're having fun. Thank you, Belly, for all your years of service, your dedication to Rotary, your terrific friendship, my forever friend, and I hope you have a great retirement. Please join me, members, in welcoming Belly to the lectern to say a few words.
Thank you, Prince. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Carol. Thank you very much for that lovely talk and speech that you gave about me. Now, I'm trying hard to see whether I can stand up to that. My eyes are blurred, I can't see. And with this age, my memory is also weak. I don't remember much. My ears are weak, I can't hear much. All right, anyways, thank you very much, Carol, for that lovely speech. I'm humbled by that and by the gesture that you have all shown. I would like to start off with my thank yous. Accountants are actually seen but not heard. Harvey, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Can you? Thank you. Okay. It's kind of like you read my mind when you said some of those words. Yes, thanks to Jason Phelps, who introduced me to Rotary. I know Jason since the last 14 years because he's been keeping me busy, including his family. I worked for the Phelps group for a short while, concurrently working for the Ministry of Health. That was my first assignment that Jason got me. Jason, if you're watching, thank you very much. And thanks to your family, your sister Heather, Mother Val, and Dad Al. For a newcomer in Canada, you gave me that home feeling away from home. Thank you, Jason. And it was Valerie who was the first executive director that I met when I came to the Rotary office. She was so welcoming and she really trusted my abilities. And Valerie, if you're watching, thank you so much. I hope I didn't let you down. And after that maternity vacancy that I had covered for, I had worked with Carol for a short while. And the lady, I don't know how many of you remember Vivian, she left and Carol gave me a call and called me. I was thrilled having worked with Carol and knew exactly how the working atmosphere would be. And with a blink of an eye, the 11 years passed by. And I was told by Valerie that you will have to get used to the idiosyncrasies of about 200 odd members then. And at that time I said, oh, that'll be a nice challenge. And I took on to that, and my God, it's unbelievable. Now I know how the 11 years passed by because you were such wonderful smiling members, always smiling while I silently charged your cards. The more I charged, the more you smiled. Thank you so much for the trust reposed in me. And now you have a new custodian who will be doing the same thing without you feeling anything. Okay, I'd like to start off by thanking the past presidents. When I came, it was Bert who was the president, and he made me feel comfortable. The very first day I met him, and after that we had some wonderful presidents like Neil Phelps during the centenary celebration, or the centennial as you say here. And I think Jeffrey Johnson would correct me, it is centennial, sir. Right. Thank you, centennial. Okay, and then we had John Courtney, the past president, and of course now Prince Kumar. Thank you all presidents, and the president of the foundation, David Hetherington, Susan Howson, and Rick Goldsmith. And of course, in between we had some. My memory is failing, as I said, it's fading. Thank you all. And then we had the committee activities, which was just great. The fundraising or just the committee's other activities. It was very interesting. There were a lot of volunteers with whom I interacted. And during that, they provided a lot of information that I wanted, keep the records straight, the accounting correct. And I'd like to thank all, starting with Lorraine. You're my favorite. You were so helpful. And of course, Christina Beniak and Mary Lack, the Polish duo, as she calls. They were just great. And Pat Newman, I thought I saw her somewhere there watching. Pat, thank you very much. It was during Pat's presidency that we had the highest collection during the fundraising. And there were so many others. I'm really, Jackie also, thank you. You people took a lot of trouble and provided me with all the necessary information. And then Fridays, I would look forward to because of one interesting person, and you know who I'm referring to. It's Harvey, it's you. Thank you, Harvey. I would always look forward to seeing you on Fridays, along with some of the older members who are not with us today. It was very interesting, and so many others joined you later on. Like once in a way, it was Jackie, and then Mitra Gudazi, the youngest member. It was really fun in the office. You kept it. You were like a light coming on every Friday. It would light up the office. Oh my God, that was wonderful. Thank you, Harvey, for that. How much did that cost? I know. Yes. Yeah, so all these interesting events have left an indelible mark in my memory, which I will cherish and reminisce over a cup of tea when I'm relaxing and doing a lot of nothing. And last but not the least, who is it? Carol, it's you. I'm unable to speak. I think my action speaks more. I'll be missing you a lot. Thank you very much, Carol. The support you gave me, the fun and the camaraderie that was great in the office. You always stood by me, and it was just wonderful working with you. I have a wonderful friend in you now. You'll always remain a good friend. Thank you so much, Carol, for everything. I'll be missing all of you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for this.
Thank you for that moving speech, Belly. And I hear that Belly has or really enjoys things in the hothouse. So, Belly, our members have got together, and on behalf of our club, I'd like to present with you a little parting gift from our club. And I'd also like to say, you know, your smiling face, anytime, I think, and I speak for all of the members here, anytime you call the office for any concern that you have, including making sure that your cards are being charged, and he's always ready to help. Well, one thing I remember in particular is, especially during COVID lockdowns, you know, I had to come down downtown sometimes to sign off the Rotary checks, and the light at the end of the tunnel was always Belly and his smiling face waiting for you right in front of the Rotary Club. And you came down, COVID or not, you were always there, consistently helping us. So thank you so much. We are going to dearly, dearly, dearly miss you. Thank you again, Belly. Next up, we have a special segment on our impact reporting from Shelterbox. Stephanie Christensen, who is the Executive Director of Shelterbox Canada and a humanitarian professional. She's been with Shelterbox for 8 years and is working to ensure that no family is left without shelter and supplies after disasters. In addition to her work here in Canada, Stephanie has been on 3 deployments with Shelterbox to Fiji after Cyclone Winston, to Ecuador after the earthquake in 2016, and most recently to the Philippines. She currently lives in Burlington with her husband and daughter and loves to cook, read, and travel. Over to Stephanie.
Hello everyone. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Stephanie. I'm the Executive Director of Shelterbox Canada. I'm sorry that I can't join you in person today. I'm hoping to see you all soon. I wanted to provide a little update for you on the incredibly generous donation and fundraising that you guys all did. For those of you that don't know, Shelterbox is an international disaster relief charity that provides emergency shelter and the basic supplies families need to recover after disasters around the world. We are Rotary International's project partner in disaster relief, and we work very closely with Rotary in all aspects of our work. The Rotary Club of Toronto remains the largest donor to Shelterbox in the world, and we are so proud to work with you guys so often. You have made an incredible difference around the world. Your most recent donation, having brought together clubs in District 7070 to raise over $30,000, has made an incredible impact for families around the world. Because of you, Shelterbox has been able to respond in Haiti after the earthquake and tropical storm Grace that has displaced millions of people. Shelterbox is providing shelter kits, water purification, solar lights, cooking equipment, and more to over 2,000 families right now on the ground in Haiti. Because of the very difficult operating environment, there's still destruction from the earthquake, from the 2010 earthquake as well, and from Hurricane Matthew in 2016. So even things like landing at the airport, driving on roads is very difficult. On top of that, there's only one access road in and out of the hardest hit area, and it's gang controlled, and so humanitarian access has been very difficult. Communities are cut off, and COVID adds a whole nother layer of challenge to this response. But with your help, we are there. We're working in a few of the hardest hit communities where people have no shelter whatsoever, and because of you, these families have a safe place to sleep now. They have the tools that they need to begin to lead their own recovery. We've been working very closely with the Rotary District in Haiti as well, and so that Rotary connection is there, and we are just so appreciative to every single one of you for helping us make a difference, not only in Haiti, but around the world. We continue to work in 8 countries right now, and we are prepared for whatever happens next, thanks to your support. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all soon. Bye.
Thank you, Stephanie. And wow, this club is the largest supporter globally for Shelterbox. That is just amazing. Amazing to all of you guys. Now, it is time for our guest speaker. And a reminder for our virtual participants that you can email your questions to question@rotarytoronto.com. For, of course, our hybrid participants, simply raise your hand and we will go from there. Now, it is my pleasure to ask Robert O'Brien to come to the stage to introduce our guest speaker.
Well, thank you, President Prince. Today, I have the privilege of filling in for past President Brian Westlake, who originally invited today's speaker, but who unavoidably could not be with us today. Now, last week, we visited the world of Parliament Hill, present and future. This week, we're going to be leaving Parliament Hill and taking a look at the world beyond us and the reality we have learned from Afghanistan, and from the detention and the release of the two Michaels is that the world outside Parliament Hill is a very complicated and dangerous place. Our speaker today is an eminent authority, an expert in world affairs, and we are so very fortunate to have him with us today at the National Club. Born in Winnipeg, law degrees, a master's in international law, London School of Economics with the Department of Foreign Affairs since 1981. He has held senior positions as Director General of the North American Bureau, ministers at the Canadian Embassy in Washington, Assistant Deputy Minister for the Americas, managing Canada's relations with North America, Latin America, and the Caribbean, Ambassador to Israel from 2012 to 2016, Ambassador to Spain from 2012 to 2014. He is a senior fellow at the Munk Center and at Glendon College. In his spare time, he's chair of Rosanna, a not-for-profit organization whose objective is to build bridges between Palestinians and Israelis in the health sector. Rotarians and guests, please join me in welcoming our most distinguished guest, Ambassador Jon Allen.
Well, thank you very much, Robert. Thanks to the Rotary Club of Toronto and to Brian Westlake for the invitation to speak. As Chris Patten, the last governor of Hong Kong, once said, my father would have appreciated hearing that intro, and my mother would have believed it. As previewed, I want to explore with you this afternoon how our government and how Canadians more generally have responded to recent examples of actual or threatened violations of international law, and how in each of these cases, the government was required to balance its interests versus its values. Jake Sullivan, Joe Biden's national security advisor, said not long ago that every US administration comes up short on the values versus interests question. Why? Because the charge of a president is to secure and safeguard the basic interests of the United States. And that requires engaging in geopolitics. And he continued, when you're engaging in geopolitics, you're inevitably pitting short-term security interests against long-term commitments to values. Indeed, as was stated in a recent Foreign Affairs article, the question of how governments square their duties to their own citizens with their obligations to those in other countries is a recurrent ethical quandary in international relations. It's at the heart of debates over humanitarian intervention, foreign aid, human rights policy, and the global digital divide. It's becoming more acute, however, as the world becomes more integrated politically, economically, technologically, ecologically. As interdependence grows, we increasingly speak of the language of globalization. But when the chips are down, we often remain nationalists at heart. So when I refer to Canadian values and interests, what exactly am I talking about? On the value side, it's the rule of law, good governance, free and fair elections, and human rights, including freedom of expression and freedom from unjust imprisonment. Canada's interests, on the other hand, include enhancing our trade and economic relations, political military alliances, protecting our citizens at home and abroad, and in some cases, getting re-elected. It's also important in this context to remember that Canada is a middle power with limited hard power influence and only a modicum of trade-related throw weight. As a result, it has to play its cards carefully on the foreign policy stage, especially when confronting powerful bullies with whom it has important commercial and/or political ties. So let's turn to some recent cases that required Canada to balance those two forces and see if it gives us some clues as to how and why the government reacted in the past and what it might mean for the future. First up is the Khashoggi case that involved the brutal assassination by Saudi officials of a Washington Post journalist and Saudi national named Jamal Khashoggi. He was assassinated in Istanbul, Turkey. It was by any standard completely beyond the bounds of international law and morality. Not only did the murder take place without charge, trial, or conviction, but it was carried out on another state's territory. It also followed a pattern of human rights abuses in Saudi Arabia and much criticism of the kingdom and its de facto leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, better known as MBS, for its brutal tactics in the war in Yemen. After weeks of denial, the Saudi government admitted that its officials had carried out the Khashoggi murder. Both the CIA and the UN Special Rapporteur who investigated the case concluded that MBS, the Crown Prince, knew of and most likely ordered the assassination. Given all of the above, it might have been relatively easy for Canada and the international community to condemn the Saudi government and the Crown Prince personally, to demand a full accounting of those responsible, and to seek compensation for the victim's family. The second case we're going to look at today involves Meng Wanzhou, the much in the news Chinese Huawei executive, who was arrested by Canadian officials in Vancouver almost 3 years ago, following a US extradition request. In response to her arrest, and without charge or access to proper consular assistance, China detained 2 Canadians, as you know, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, and increased the sentences of 2 other Canadians from imprisonment to the death penalty. From Canada's perspective, these actions and the trade sanctions imposed by China that followed were examples of hostage diplomacy and clear violations of international law and diplomatic practice. Our third case involves the 2014 Russian invasion and annexation of the Crimean Peninsula in Ukraine, an action that contravened the UN Charter prohibition on violating the territorial integrity of another state. And in addition, an international inquiry determined that a Russian missile fired during the invasion was responsible for the downing of a Malaysian Airlines plane that killed 298 passengers and crew. About 1.5 years ago, Israel's then Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu threatened to annex, that is, declare sovereignty over up to 30% of the West Bank, a move that would have legitimized thousands of illegal Israeli settlements and left Palestinians with a disconnected Bantustan-like possibility of a state. It too would have been a clear violation of international law, of various UN Security Council resolutions, and a decision by the International Court of Justice. Finally, let's consider a relatively new dilemma facing Western states: the debate over COVID-19 vaccines. From the outset of the pandemic, wealthy Western governments often spoke about the importance of global health security, even as they acted aggressively to lock up supplies of vaccines for their own populations. Today, while literally billions of third world citizens haven't been able to secure even their first vaccination, we in Canada, the United States, and Europe are considering boosters and vaccinations for children under 12. While the West's actions are not violations of international law, they certainly raise fundamental moral questions about our responsibility for our fellow global citizens. So, how did the Canadian government respond to each of these cases? Canada condemned the Khashoggi murder and applied targeted sanctions against the Saudi officials accused of allegedly carrying out the murder. It did not criticize or apply sanctions against the Crown Prince, MBS. For some time, it was considering whether to cancel a contract with Saudi Arabia for the sale of light armored vehicles worth approximately $15 billion. However, in the end, it never stopped delivering the vehicles and recently issued an export permit for them. When considering its responses, the government no doubt had in mind a previous incident when our then Foreign Minister, Chrystia Freeland, tweeted criticism of the Saudis for their abuses of women's rights. In response, the Saudi government expelled our ambassador and recalled their own, suspended trade and investments, and forced some 30,000 Saudi students studying in Canada to return home. In sharp contrast, in the Munk case, the government has steadfastly stuck to its principles and proceeded with the possible extradition of the Huawei executive on the basis of its obligation to uphold the rule of law and its treaty obligations to the US. And it did so despite significant pressure from China, the families of the jailed Canadians, and a number of prominent Canadians. In response to Russia's actions in Crimea, Canada, led by then Foreign Minister Freeland, who is a Ukrainian Canadian with strong ties to that country, condemned Russia's annexation as illegal. It joined with its G7 partners to expel Russia from the G8. It imposed sanctions on the energy and financial sectors in Russia, as well as asset freezes and prohibitions on dealing with a variety of Russian individuals and companies. In responding to Israel's threatened annexation of parts of the West Bank, and after some pressure from former diplomats and ministers, including myself, the Prime Minister restated Canada's clear opposition to any unilateral annexation by Israel, and restated the government's strong support for a negotiated two-state solution in the region. On the COVID front, I'm afraid Canada's record of generosity has been thin. Before deigning to provide 40 million doses of vaccines to COVAX, the body which is collecting and distributing vaccines for the third world, Canada made sure that it had more than enough vaccines to cover every woman and child in the country twice over. Having had a quick look at the government's responses to these various actions, I'd like to now examine the reactions by Canadian citizens writ large to the same events. And in summary, I would argue that Canadians' views have been all over the values versus interests map. With respect to Ukraine, for example, there was little pushback. First, Ukrainian Canadians are a substantial and organized voting bloc in Canada. Second, our trade and economic interests with Russia are relatively small. Finally, Russia's actions were a blatant violation of international law, and Vladimir Putin is generally viewed as a ruthless bully by many Canadians. As a result, therefore, punishing Russia and Russians had little political, economic, or domestic electoral cost, and it made Canadians feel good that we were doing something. As an aside, I should just say that there is a strong debate amongst academics and practitioners alike about the value and effectiveness of sanctions, but in some cases, apartheid South Africa, they've done great things, and in other cases, probably less so. The Khashoggi murder and Saudi's other human rights violations provoked vastly different views from Canadians. A prominent Canadian academic, international lawyer, argued that while canceling the armored vehicle contract would have had little impact on Saudi Arabia, it would affect some 3,000 jobs in southwestern Ontario. Other Canadians, including some union workers whose jobs would have been directly affected if the contract were terminated, argued in favor of canceling it. For them, Canada's support for the protection of human rights was more important than the contract. The Munk affair resulted in the most disparate and emotional of responses by Canadians. This is perhaps not surprising, as her arrest directly impacted the lives and well-being of several Canadian citizens. For example, one well-known Canadian international lawyer argued that when Canada first received the US extradition request, it should have warned Mrs. Munk not to enter the country. A former Minister of Foreign Affairs agreed. A former Minister of Justice, a former Supreme Court judge, and 20 prominent Canadians argued in a letter to the Prime Minister that Canada should ignore our treaty obligations with the US, drop the ongoing legal proceedings, and engage in a prisoner swap with the Chinese. Others, I included, argued that kowtowing to the Chinese in this case would only encourage similar renegade behavior by China in the future. Indeed, China has made a practice of kidnapping the citizens of other countries and otherwise imposing sanctions on countries when the latter takes actions such as supporting Chinese dissidents that China doesn't like much. In my view, it was unlikely that a swap by Canada was going to alter this pattern. But as I should say, many people more experienced and more powerful than I have argued just the opposite. In responding to Israel's threatened annexation of a large portion of the West Bank, there were many Canadians who focused on the importance of the respect for the rule of law and the Palestinian right of self-determination. Within the Jewish community, there were those who believe in a greater Israel and who supported the annexation, while the majority of Canadian Jews appeared to oppose the threat as a move too far that might do Israel more harm than good. Needless to say, Palestinian Canadians and Canadian Arabs in general strongly opposed the move. One aspect of both the Meng and the Khashoggi cases intrigued and surprised me a bit. Traditionally, many in the academy, both professors and students alike, could have historically been counted on to back the values as opposed to the interest side of these conflicts. After all, students often tend to want to challenge norms and entrench privileges, and my experience has been that Canadian professors tend for the most part to be more liberal than conservative. Well, in conversation with more than one academic and a university president, I encountered just the opposite when discussing both the Munk and the Khashoggi cases. And why might that be? Because their interests, i.e. the 640,000 or so international students that study at Canadian post-secondary institutions and the hefty tuition fees that they pay, would be directly affected if the government openly criticized either the Chinese or the Saudi governments. Both countries send significant numbers of students to universities across the country. Like other critics of government, some of those academics have asked why Canada arrested Munk in the first place and why the government doesn't just drop or didn't just drop the extradition. Others seem to view the ongoing sales of arms to Saudi Arabia as a rather minor problem to be solved. If we don't sell to them, they argue, others will. So there are no easy answers to the dilemma of balancing values versus interests. Our government appears to deal with each situation as a one-off. Sometimes it's easy for the government to uphold its stated values, especially when its interests are not much threatened, as in Russia's invasion of Crimea. Other times, they appear to take different positions on seemingly similar fact situations. For example, recently banning exports of weapons to Turkey because of their human rights record, but not to Saudi Arabia. Canadians may be intensely interested in an issue, Munk, for example, and pressure the government from one or both sides. Other times, the government and its citizens are of the same mind. Sometimes we can be proud of our government's stance, other times not so much. Not long after I lectured on this subject in November of 2020, Nick Nanos published the results of a poll in which he asked Canadians for their views on the role and the focus of Canadian foreign policy. His results surprised me a bit. For example, he found that Canadians support Canada's role in the world in the following areas. As peacekeepers, 31%. And as advocates for human rights and as a model for what other countries should be, 19% each. So well over 50% of Canadians believed, I would suggest, in the values side of the equation. Second, by a margin of 3-1, Canadians said that we should be promoting Canadian values as opposed to its interests. What were those values in the poll? Inclusivity, peace, human rights, and democracy. Third, when respondents were asked about a range of factors to consider when selling military equipment to foreign countries, respect for human rights by the buyer received 31% of the votes, and respect for international law, 22%. And they outranked Canadian jobs, 11%, and developing Canadian technology and innovation, 13%. 14% of Canadians said that we shouldn't export military equipment at all. Finally, he concluded that Canadians continue to see the country as having a role as leading by example, and that the Canadian forces are viewed as having a critical role in advancing those values. So, as Canadian citizens who are clearly interested in foreign and domestic politics and policy, I'd be very interested in your views on these questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. I do have a question online, and of course, if anyone has a question here, they can raise their hand. So when it comes to Canadian values and interests, you've talked about the diversity in those values and interests, and of course, the Canadian Corps being the arm for the government. What is really the position or the function of the Canadian Diplomatic Corps as it relates to bringing the diversity of values and interests of Canadians to the forefront?
Great question. You know, the first role of a Canadian diplomat, whether we're abroad or in Ottawa, is to follow the rules of the government. Government makes policy, and we live in the parliamentary system, and we carry out that policy. On the other hand, government doesn't make policy in a vacuum. And essentially, whether it's on Khashoggi or Munk, they receive policy advice from the bureaucracy, from their ambassadors abroad. And that policy advice inevitably goes into the decision-making by the foreign minister, by the prime minister, and by his advisors. So I would say that our ambassador in China, who was heavily involved in the final outcome of the Munk case, would have been providing advice to the prime minister on a whole range of issues. In that case, I would suggest he wouldn't have even gotten involved in the values and interests. He would have been directly involved in trying to figure out what would it take to get Munk back and to get the Michaels out. In the Khashoggi case, I do know that our ambassador there was not happy with the initial criticism by Minister Freeland of human rights in the kingdom, would have been supporting the export of the light armored vehicles, but there were undoubtedly people within the department in our human rights sections that were probably providing alternate views. So the role of the diplomat is inevitably in what we used to call a memo to the minister. You'd send up a memo to the minister with advice, and it always provided two options. And you never wanted to just give him one option because he or her, because there wasn't just one option in the bureaucracy generally, and they needed a little bit of wiggle room. So often you would get a balance, I say, of interests and values. You could do this, and these are the Canadians that would complain, or this would be the reaction of the government in question, or you could do that. And this is the political ramifications of that for you in Quebec. For example, on the war in Iraq, when Prime Minister Chrétien decided not to join the Americans. And that was a time when you remember you were either with them or against them with George W. Bush. And it was rather brave of Chrétien to say we're not going. You know, that was a complex time, and the Prime Minister was willing to stick up for his values. He didn't see the evidence that supported weapons in Iraq, and he was prepared to basically stiff the Americans on the basis of the fact that no UN resolution, no evidence, we're not joining you. So it's always a complicated set of issues, but diplomats play their role in it.
Thank you, John. Another question from our virtual audience. Being that Canada is a relatively small country in the global perspective, but a wealthy one, does our opinion really, and how important is our opinion, does it really matter to other players?
Thank you. Another good question. Right after the war, Canada was one of 51 countries. We were a member of NATO. We had the 4th and 5th largest navies and armies in the world. We were a real player. And interestingly, as a real player, where we really made our mark was in peacekeeping. Lester Pearson won the Nobel Prize for peacekeeping. We were involved in peacekeeping all over the world. As time grew, we recognized that we were no longer, first of all, there wasn't just 51, there's now 193 members of the United Nations, and we kind of got smaller and smaller, certainly in terms of our Navy, military, and Air Force. But we were respected, and we are still respected around the world. We are next to the United States, and other countries think that because we're next to the United States and because we have this intimate role with them, we interpret the United States in a way that they're interested in. We're also a joiner. So we are members, as I said, of NATO, of the G7, of the Francophonie, of the Commonwealth, of APEC. Any organization that will take us, we will join, because we realize that multilaterally, working with our neighbors, we are much more effective and powerful than on our own. We're not going to be able to affect China by ourselves. We're not going to be able to affect Russia by ourselves. And what I've argued on the Munk case is that we and the Europeans and the Australians and the New Zealanders and the Nordics and the Americans and the Brits now, because they're no longer the Europeans, should be getting together, and we should be making it absolutely clear to the Chinese and to the Russians that enough is enough. Canada alone is not going to impose trade sanctions on China and have an effect. But if all of those countries did and said, this has to stop, you cannot go on kidnapping and bullying us individually, pick us off individually. You notice they didn't kidnap any American diplomats or citizens. Then you can have an effect. So do we have a role? I think we do have a role. I think we have a role on the values side, frankly. Even though we can't always uphold the values side, I think it's important for Canada to speak on behalf of human rights and humanitarian issues and foreign aid, something that frankly our last two governments have not done. I think we've fallen behind under Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau, but we were active under Chrétien and Axworthy and under Brian Mulroney, who was very important in the anti-apartheid fight and in international environmental issues. So Canada can play a role if it wants to. I think our current government is absorbed with domestic issues. I don't think the Prime Minister has a great interest in foreign policy, unlike his father. And, you know, maybe he's right. Maybe child care, Indigenous issues, getting the economy back, COVID, maybe that's where his priority should be. But, you know, running for the Security Council and saying we're back and then pre-COVID for 4 years doing nothing on the foreign policy side is not the way to go. Thanks.
Thank you, John. You know, you talked about being a connector, and it's very much similar to our Rotary values of being a connector to communities and people in need and our donors. So thank you very much for your time today. A donation has been made in your honor to protect Rosanna, a registered Canadian charity which seeks to build bridges to better understanding between Israelis and Palestinians through health. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Rotarians, next week, Wednesday, October 6th, we are having a very special President's Cocktail. It's none other than our past presidents. And I know we have a few in the room. And they're going to be telling us how they saw things the way it was. So you certainly don't want to miss this. It's Wednesday at 5:30, and it will be a virtual President's Cocktail, hosted by none other than past President Jon Allen, chair of the Past President's Council. Friday, October 8th, there will be no meeting due to Thanksgiving. But we will meet virtually again on October 15th. Our guest speaker will be Dennis Crawford, and his topic will be the history of John Bassett. And again, for the Rotarians and the Rotaractors, please make sure you have your 2-dose certificates on file. Thank you everyone for attending this meeting today. And feel free to say a few personal words to Belly as you exit the room. Belly, I must say, this has been one of the largest crowds in our hybrid meeting, and really they're here to thank you. So thank you again. Have a wonderful weekend.